Okay, I'm beginning to record right now. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second meeting of 113 release. I'm Aish, your release lead. And for those of you who just joined, if you haven't added your name onto the attendees list, please do so. And as always, this meeting is being recorded and will end up in YouTube. So please be mindful of what you say. Let's get started here. I have a few general updates, but I'll keep it till the end because we do seem to have quite a bit of the agenda already up there. So, this, as for dates, today we are beginning our enhancement collection. So I will kick it off with Kendrick with some enhancement updates.
Yeah, has everybody been getting the flurry of emails this morning? It's been annoying yet? So yeah, so that's sort of what's happened. So all 120 something open issues got pinged over the past week. Thank you to a few of the shadows who stepped up and really kind of took it upon themselves. I gave them a little bit of a bump, and they just kind of ran with it of being able to kind of get some of the stuff from 112, trying to close down the 112 milestone and seeing what needs to happen to either push those to 113 or just take them out of the milestone itself. We got a few of those that are still kind of lagging behind, but we'll get that taken care of in due time. As of today, and actually as of about 10 seconds ago, as I updated this, we had one more added. So we've got 38 features, enhancements. I'm going to keep catching myself saying that. 38 enhancements that have been added to the doc for 113. Now, as Aish pointed out here, there's 4 of them that are being untracked, and this is because I'm sort of in a bind whether they really should be tracked or not. And these are all related to Stephen Augustus's sort of overarching KEP process. Mm-hmm. So whether they should really be tracked, because are they really enhancements to Kubernetes or are they enhancements to a process? And so that's why I'm kind of looking at it as, is it really something that the majority of people are going to want to look at and actually track this as the release goes?
Yeah, so it's more of a process update than anything in the code or anything of that sort.
Exactly.
Yeah, Aaron also points.
I agree with Aaron's point there too.
Yeah, I was a little confused too when they showed up as features in the repo. But yeah, it's completely, I think it makes sense if we don't mark them as tracked, but then they just process stuff there.
Yeah, and so, I mean, that's actually a thing. Do we even keep him there? Do we actually tag him part of the milestone? Do we tell Stephen, say, we should probably move this somewhere else? I don't know what the best thing is to kind of alleviate a lot of confusion that could potentially come up.
Yeah. Is Stephen on the call today? Don't think so. I can follow up offline with him, both of us, Kendrick, and my inclination is to not have them there if they're not really contributing to the code itself in 113. But we can, if there must be some reason why he wanted it to be there versus tracking them separately. So we can follow up and close out on those.
Okay. Sounds good. So, like as I said, those are the ones that were untracked. That's the reason why they kept that way. You had also put in there were some things that were inside of KK that were being that are features as well, that aren't necessarily in the features repo. So I actually had not looked or added those. So I would kind of just look to some guidance and see what everybody else here sort of thinks is the proper way to go about this. Do we tell them, or should I go ahead and open a enhancement issue for them and start copying them in and making sure they are tracked?
Don't do that.
Teach them how to fish.
I'll let our release lead talk.
For some context, these actually came up from the bug triage handbook. So there were a few queries there that were pulling these in. And when I looked into that, they were all like they're marked as kind feature. So that's where the confusion was. Should this be more like an enhancement person tracking it versus like the bug triage lead tracking it? And when I spoke to Nico, looks like he was not actively tracking these because they had the feature label on it. So if if we just don't want it to be as part of the enhancement report, then we should just remove that feature label and then let it go as part of bug triage tracking. I'm also curious to know what we've done with these in the past releases.
So my suggestion was at least one of these server-side printing continued actually ties back to a feature issue in somewhere in the comments. So
That's
it's
a
already
good example of one where it's sort of like a SIG's task list. And I think we need to give them the ability to do that, but just understand that that's what it is.
Yeah, so I think you've already got the issues you're tracking are clearly delineated in the features repo. I wouldn't worry about these.
I think only one of them has something in the feature repo, as you were pointing out, Aaron. Mm-hmm. The other three, I think, are just here. I don't see it pointing to an issue there.
Yeah, and I already pruned one of them down to just kind cleanup instead of kind feature because it's just talking about testing. Anyway, if you're asking if we should track these, I would say no.
That brings another point. Also, the ones that were called client cleanup, again, I just want to make sure that is that being tracked as a feature, or should that again come under bug triage, which is the net that actually catches these and tracks these? Because I know at CD, we wanted to call it a cleanup, but we also opened like a feature issue for that. So, so that was more of, I'm fine like not putting it in the feature repo, but I just want to make sure that it comes under someone's radar.
I think that just a conversation like this is probably sufficient. And I think for this particular current set, they're ones that they're on the right people's radar already and don't need the release team. So we've kind of just done that in the past. I feel like Simi ignored them, and they're marked the way they're marked to make it easy for their owners and responsible parties for them to track them, but we don't need to.
Okay. So as long as these kind of go in as part of the normal coding cycle, we should, and we don't see any disruption in test signals and stuff, it should be fine for these to just roll in. Okay. I will keep an eye on this separately. And then we can also see, Kendrick, we can also circle back to see what we can do for future milestones.
Yeah, it sounds good. I'll go ahead and just keep going down the agenda since I know we have some things to hit. So Aish and I have been sort of splitting the workload and hitting every single SIG meeting we possibly can to just kind of give them an update of one, to say hello, introduce ourselves, this is who we are. Again, to also give them an update. This is the expectations of what 113 is going to be. A little more stable release. Let's try to stay away from massive alpha features that could break things because of the aggressive timeline. That's sort of just been the message that we've been putting in there. Been pretty well received. There's of course there's a few things we'd always bring up the features repo with that particular SIG and see if there's anything that could be outstanding. However, I think everything's probably on a pretty good track right now for what people had said that they want to commit, versus when we had said this, they said, okay, well, I guess there's some things we should probably back out. One of the ones that stood out in my mind was the out-of-tree cloud provider. They were sort of really thinking, well, I don't know if we'll actually make it this time. So they are going to probably talk about it a little bit more, but probably looking at that as being deferred to 114. Any questions about that?
Is there a list somewhere of SIGs that you hit versus have not hit?
Not
it's in
really.
Our calendar. Yeah, we can.
I can put up a list. Yeah, we kind of mostly prioritize the SIGs that had some features falling from 112 to 113. So those were the ones we were going off first, but I can put a list together. Yeah. And the couple of things that kind of worry me is like the core DNS, they are trying to make that default this still in 113, and then the taint node stuff, they are still trying to land it in 113. So those two things. I've asked them to, have requested them to land things by end of October if possible, so that we'll have quite some time to, quite a bit of runway to see how it affects the tests and if they're stable or not. but something that we'll have to track closely.
Cool. Yeah, and so there were some questions that came up in these meetings, more or less around organization and how things are tagged. And we had a conversation with Stephen to kind of get his idea about this, because we were a little bit, well, we didn't really know, we need to actually close out the past milestone. So we've got to get things out of that milestone or move them to a next one so we can actually close it out. So that was the first step. The other one was looking at graduating and figuring out what do the labels essentially mean when we do tracked yes and tracked no. So we had a conversation with them to try to figure out, well, if it's tracked, but doesn't that, because my opinion, I looked at it and I said, well, doesn't that essentially just repeat itself if I just go 113? Well, isn't that just the same exact thing as tracked yes? But the one thing is we kind of realize is that if you bump something out of the milestone, you don't necessarily get a notification for it. And so if you want to go and check that and see if it's still in the milestone or check it back, it's in the sheet, then you can actually use a label to actually be able to find that. So we found that the track labels do serve a purpose. So they are there for a reason. As of about 30 minutes ago, every one of the features should have a tracked yes or tracked no label. So if it's tracked yes, that means it is in the tracking sheet. Tracked no, of course, means it's not in there. So that's sort of what we came away from that. Aisha, did you have anything to follow up on that as well?
Yeah, the bigger question that some SIGs were expecting guidance around was, okay, if a feature is staying in the same stage, this milestone, for example, if it graduated to beta, and if it continues to stay in beta, do we remove the milestone or should we just retain like the previous cycle's milestone? What is the process around it? So when Kendrick and I spoke, and with Stephen, it looks like we removed the milestone. We said we clear the milestone so that they can attribute it to a future milestone whenever it's graduating. So Kendrick, if we could just update say the handbook, the feature lead handbook to indicate this clearly. And also I'm looking at where we should put this information so that the other SIGs, the feature owners can also get to know what the state diagram there is.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So
that can be done.
Cool. Where do we update this so that others, whoever wants to open a feature would know this?
That's a good question. I'm not too sure, to be honest with you.
Okay, we can dig that up, and unless anybody on the call knows which is a good place to put this information in. But yeah, that state automata is what most SIGs are missing at this point. At least it came up with a couple of SIGs. So if it's possible, we should clear it up so that we have like a process. There are multiple ways to do this. We should just pick one at least for the short term so that the future releases can update it as they see fit. Is there anything else that you want to add, Kendrick? If not, we can move to the next item.
Nope, we can go ahead and move on to the next item.
Aaron, I put a bullet there so that we could talk about your conversation with SIG-ARC if you want to.
I don't have anything concrete here other than to say that I feel like continuing in the vein of stabilization, it would be a good idea if we involved somebody from SIG architecture earlier on in the process. So I was thinking of having a run through of what the features list looks like prior to feature freeze to give SIG architecture a chance to have some input there. And then we could potentially have another review prior to entering code freeze to have more of an idea of like, given where we are right now, do we still feel like it's the same level of risk? Or has risk increased now that we're in the weeds a little bit? I cannot do that this week due to travel schedule, but I think perhaps next week I'll see if I can get something going on SIG-ARC's calendar.
Thanks a lot. The feature spreadsheet should be up to date, and I can give you a list of the SIGs that we've already spoken to. Next up is CI Signal. Josh, you want to take it away?
Howdy. Just so people know, this week I'm going to start producing CI Signal reports on Tuesdays. So you'll see that tomorrow. We have what looks like a whole bunch of failing tests, but it's actually not. It's the same test failures being played out across multiple tests. There's a couple of things. One is a whole bunch of upgrade tests are failing for different reasons. Number one is we have 2 upgrade tests that kind of lack ownership. These have been a problem on past releases. They're failing now. Discussion is underway to figure out who's responsible for these, and if nobody's responsible for these, if we're going to remove them from the test suite. The rest of the upgrade tests are all failing because of a change to daemon set fields, and work on that is currently underway. Morton, you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, so it's a new field was actually added to the pod spec, and the way the controller revisions work caused the daemon set to fail in certain scenarios. But there was a discussion about this in SIGApp's meeting this morning, and it's underway to figure out how to handle it.
Yeah. So that's honestly, that daemon set issue is the rest of the upgrade failures. We have a couple of recent test failures that we don't know if they're significant yet, such as VMware conformance test just failed. We don't really actually understand that test. It's relatively new. We have a bunch of new conformance tests in the blocking suite, which is a good thing. We want conformance tests there, but it does mean that we're not that familiar with the tests. So Marie is going to actually follow up with the VMware team because they seem to do alternate runs of that test, and only one of the alternate runs is failing. So I want to find that out.
I'm a little vaguely unclear on how conformance tests got added into release master blocking, for what it's worth.
Okay.
Could you maybe sync up with me offline? I'd like to see the issues that showed this getting added and the discussion that went back and forth on that. Because I do believe VMware's conformance test to be like, yeah, they're submitting results, but from a couple different environments. So
okay, it got added. Those got added to the blocking suite before I started.
Yeah, no, I'm aware of that.
Okay, so it'd be nice to do that. GCE scale performance is flaking. This is not a new thing, but we do need to follow up with SIG scalability to see if the flakiness means anything. I do notice that was removed. That particular test was removed from 112 blocking during blocking, which makes me think that flaking was pretty serious towards the close of 112. And then test infra is actually in the process of sort of reconciling the canonical list of blocking tests for release, just so that people know that that's going on. So the list of tests that we look at is going to change before code slush.
Okay. And as of now, we are looking at the master blocking, Josh? Or you?
Right now I'm looking at master blocking because one thing I did go is I went through the list to see if there were any tests on 112 blocking that there wasn't an equivalent for in master blocking. And the only thing I could really find was the 111 on 112 for kubeadmin. But there currently isn't any equivalent of that for master that I can look at as far as I know.
Okay. They also have a separate dashboard, right, that they track more closely, the cluster lifecycle dashboard. There's a kubeadmin one there. Yeah.
Yes. The kubeadm's upgrade tests don't really start showing up until actual releases of Kubernetes have been cut with a changed version. So like once we actually cut a release branch, I think that's generally when we can start that up.
Yeah.
And so to be clear, Josh is looking at release master blocking as CI signal guy to make sure that's the health of the release. But then in terms of reconciling the list of blocking tests to make sure they're the same and consistent everywhere, we're starting with release 112 blocking as the authoritative source and comparing that to all the release 1.y blocking dashboards. And then once those all look good, we'll then make sure that that lines up with release master blocking. That's why I noticed, for example, there are all these conformance jobs on release master blocking. I'm kind of scratching my head, but I'm not really going to dig into it just yet.
Sounds good. Thanks, Aaron. Just one more quick note on the skew test that we're failing, Josh. I commented on the issue itself. Zach Loafman, he was going to take a look at the upgrade test infra itself. That's what I heard from Robert Bailey from say Cluster Lifecycle. I CC'd him on all the issues. Yeah, if we don't get a good response from SIG GCP, Zach might also be able to look at us.
Yeah, which seems unlikely. Right now, SIG GCP is not well staffed.
Yeah.
So I'm not necessarily expecting a response.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so we'll look for a response from Zach.
Yeah. Cool. Is there anything else, or can we move on?
No, that's it. Otherwise, we're actually relatively clean in terms of tests. Really not a lot worrisome at this stage, which is nice.
Yeah, I expected master to go a lot more red once we open the gates, but surprisingly.
Yeah, I mean, and actually only so far, only one thing that's blowing up is something that is definitely feature breakage. So it just means we'll get all our breakage later. That's what it means.
Okay. Cool. Next up.
Positive. It's working this time.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're still almost 2 months out, so
yeah.
Let's see. Cool. Next up is bug triage. Nico.
Hello. So first week was I automated the tracking sheet, which can be found. Which is basically I made Google Sheets to parse the links that have certain length and milestone 113, and then the additional fields are regex, picking up title and 6, etc. And I wonder if this can be used for other release teams, or generally how can I make it either a custom function in Google Sheets, customizable, or something similar.
So Nico, right now it's pulling everything that's 113 and kind bug. Is that right? I'm sorry.
Sorry.
So what's the query?
Yeah, it's kind bug.
Okay. So would you be updating this to scrape everything else that matches the queries that you'd be running as bug triage there?
Sorry, I don't have good internet. Could you repeat that?
So I was just curious, there are many more issues, right? That if I just today query 113 with issues, open issues, there are a bunch more that's coming. So I was just curious if you're going to do another iteration of this, broadening your query.
Yeah, I should expand that to have the whole 113 milestone and then look at them specifically.
Cool. And this one would really help for us to know if any labels are missing. So that's probably it'll be a good idea to expand it to I know there are like 4 different queries that triage as bug triage you track. Once we expand that, it'll be good to know which issues don't have their expected labels and SIGs and everything.
Yeah, that can be done. There is some cut up because of so most of the rest of the items are from enhancements, like I think that the features issues are enhancements, and KubeADM are specific to the cluster lifecycle and as well to test infra.
So that again, this goes back to the first discussion we had. So do we also actively look at ADM issues that are marked for 113, or do we just leave it to them and wait for them to cut a build and we just use it? How have we done this in the past? Anyone?
Can you repeat the question?
So there are a bunch of, quite a few issues under Kubernetes kubeadm that are marked for 113, issues and features and everything. So do we actively track them like how we track the Kubernetes issues under KK?
We have not. They've always operated responsibly and sufficiently to be doing their own thing. And especially in the last cycle, I sort of viewed that as an example of how the splitting of the monolith should work.
Okay.
We're saying that everybody's going to be able to operate on their own cadence and they can mark and track the things that happen in their timeline. But I do have worries that we just sort of scatter to the wind and somehow the release team is inferring what's going on across all of these disparate things. So I like that you're worrying about it and wondering like, how is this stuff happening? For them, it's worked fine in the past.
Okay.
Ultimately, it's not up to us to cut. Well, maybe kubeadm is still locked in tree. I kind of forget, but like, it's not something we should be tracking. It's something the kubeadm team should be tracking as a downstream consumer of the Kubernetes release.
They are still unfortunately locked in tree.
Okay.
And we need to cut their packages, which is how people consume them generally.
Right.
I feel though that we run into an issue, if nothing else, at the release notes point where we're trying to define or document which things were used and tested in coordination with each other. And then as we do that, we find people going, oh, that thing's revved, I didn't realize it, so I need to make this change. So we're having some late-breaking integration challenges increasingly, I feel like, because of this. It's nice to aspire to everybody doing their thing, but some level of coordination. I don't see us as responsible in the release team for driving all of it, but somehow we are still a glue that gives visibility across these areas.
Right. For better or for worse, kubeadm is not the thing with which we exercise all of our integrations and add-ons and features across all of the sundry cloud providers and whatnot. So it's no surprise to me that kubeadm will end up tripping on a couple cases here or there. If there was increased signal from them, that could certainly help. But it's why we kind of have to focus on just like one tool for standing up clusters as much as possible, rather than focusing on like the 5 to 10 different tools, because then how do we choose which of those tools are the ones that we're paying attention to? And that's a very slippery slope.
So I don't think the release team should worry about the kubeadm repository in specific, because we make changes to the milestones all the time.
Right.
That's basically planning for the kubeadm team. And yeah, that's not for the release team to follow directly.
Yeah,
Okay.
like I mean, I have a milestone called V113 in the test info repo, but it's not like that's part of the Kubernetes release. I'm just trying to have our life cycle follow your life cycle. That's all.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's good to know. Thanks. Nico, did you have anything there? I know the last point I added, but then if there's, I'll wait for you to finish before I go on to the last point.
Yeah, let me see. About the Devil MD, that all PRs should be blocked on milestone labels. So is it that no PRs are to be merged if they don't have a milestone?
Yeah. So I added that point. Yeah. At this stage in the release cycle, milestone is a required field to be merge blocking, right? But I do see a couple of PR. Sorry?
Not at this point in the release. At this point, you don't need a milestone. Right?
Oh, okay.
Only during the code freeze and code slush do we require things to be in the 13th milestone.
Okay, because the developer guide that says week 1 to 8, the milestone was one of the required fields there.
Well, we can certainly change the automation to match whatever.
That is a change in how we have historically operated.
If the doc says that, the doc's wrong. the doc
My
says.
question would be when you would ever develop. Don't you need a time for things outside the milestone to be developed?
So
That's true.
there was thinking that it would be really cool / convenient if we could just auto label PRs during this period, or sorry, auto milestone PRs during this period, and then switch it over to a manual process when we hit burn down. The thinking was that if every PR belongs to a milestone, we can start asking ourselves questions like how many pull requests have been merged this far into the release cycle, and how does that compare to our velocity last release cycle? But this is totally a nice to have. I suspect we'll talk about it during retrospective on Tuesday.
Okay.
I'm not sold on it. I feel like you could get that data some other way, but it could be a neat idea. But the docs are wrong if the docs say milestone is required.
Yeah.
Yep,
Currently,
that
the
was-
milestone can only be applied by a limited set of people. So we probably shouldn't add that as a requirement right now.
Yeah.
I think we merged that doc after that point in the cycle, so maybe we weren't reading it as clearly. I'll send a PR to fix it.
Cool. So main reason was I do see a whole bunch of I see a whole bunch of PRs getting, and most of them don't have the milestone tag there. So I was just curious how aggressively should we be even looking at what goes in right now, versus just care about it till it's closer to code slush. So that's where this whole the last point came in.
Historically, we don't watch closely right now. To the point of basically not at all.
Okay. Cool. So I'll watch out for a PR from you to update the docs, Tim. Thank you. All right. That brings us to the next one, test infra. I know last week we bumped the Go version to 1.11. And I do see a couple of PRs still open to bump Travis and publishing bot. Are all the CI images bumped? Cole, do you have any updates there?
Yeah, so basically the big change was that previously we didn't necessarily have separate versions of every job for every branch. If it was appropriate for a version of a job to run on multiple branches, we just kept a single version there. But at this point, we'd like to start creating individual versions for every branch that we have to make sure that we can do updates properly without any problems like we did. So that's kind of the main takeaway going forward with how we'll be creating jobs going forward for new branches. We'll always be creating separate jobs instead of sometimes reusing existing versions. But as of now, I believe Ben was taking the charge of switching a lot of the jobs over. I think all the ones that would for sure be breaking have been fixed, and we don't see any more failures. If there are any more that are noticed, we can fix that. But I think we've got everything taken care of at this point.
Cool. Thanks a lot. And the other one I added was HCD2. Aaron, I know you had some PRs last week, and you also had a question on another PR.
Good grief! Which question? Which PR?
I will try to dig that up. This was the one where you're saying some jobs still were dependent on HCD2.
I have nuked every job that depends on HCD2, and Liget merged in code that removed support for HCD2. I think maybe he had an outstanding question. I can catch up with him. There might still be some HCD code in our vendor directory for some reason that isn't super clear to me. But as far as I'm aware, we're done already.
Awesome.
But it's still on my radar to kind of follow up, but there have been no crazy explosions or changes in CI signal since we stripped out the jobs and since we stripped out the code related to it.
Yeah. Both Go 1.11 and this one, the CI signal just remained quiet. So that's where,
Well, the first time we moved to Go 1.11, it did not.
It did not. But after the second one. Cool. I will dig up on the one issue I think you had some question on, and I'll follow up offline if it's still a blocker. Okay, next up is docs. Tim?
Hey, everybody. So we've got a couple of open PRs from the last release cycle. Main aims for this week are just to make sure that the tracking spreadsheet is up to date and that those old open PRs. They don't need any updates, or if they do, that it's correctly tracked. So we're reaching out to enhancement owners this week to ensure the accuracy of the tracking sheet and to begin pinging them for the work in progress PRs.
Cool. And do you have access to the enhancement sheet, Tim, just to make sure?
I think I still need to talk to you about that. It's not working for me for some reason.
Okay, we can chat offline. Okay, then it's release notes by Mike.
Hey, sorry, I was hunting for the unmute. There is one, hey, how's it going, everyone? There's one release notes item that I didn't put in there. Do we include release notes for out-of-tree enhancements in our release announcements?
Yeah, that was me. Again, this came up in another sync up that we had. This is more of a question for SIG PM and the release team in general. So how do we my inclination is we would not be mentioning about out-of-tree stuff in our release notes, but just curious to know what we've done in the past, and I can follow up with SIG PM.
I would think that if the changes influence the deliverables of the release, whether that's the kind of binaries or containers that we've referenced, that we should probably include changes to them in the release notes. But if they don't, then I think it's fine to not, personally.
Yeah, they weren't, I can think up offline to which SIG and which feature this is specifically, but they weren't too sure about this, and they were looking at, to us to give them some guidance. I was hoping Stephen will be on the call today to talk a little bit about this. If not, I can follow up with them offline. Yeah, do you want to go over your pending items?
Sure, yeah. So the pending items that I have on my plate that I have to do ideally this week, I'd like to begin both of these things. I'd like to set up I have 3 shadows, I think, and I haven't really met any of them face-to-face yet. So I'd like to set up a face-to-face, like weekly or bi-weekly meeting with my shadows, get that going. And then the main action item for me from last release that I really want to get started on is one thing that was really difficult is that we would generate the release notes document, copy edit it, realize that we wanted to make some sort of structural change to how we were rendering the document, do that, copy over all the copy edits, and that kind of consistently copying over all the copy edits was a really arduous process. So I want to come up with some sort of strategy for allowing us to make those copy edits to release notes on an ongoing basis. Ideally, we would be able to just edit people's PRs because you can edit release note text if we can edit the descriptions, but that would require like an obnoxious level of GitHub permission. So I think it would be easy to do with a little bit of tooling, so I'm going to work on that and, rendering the document on an ongoing basis.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, finally, couple of updates from my end. Josh, do you think you want to talk about the last week in Kubernetes updates that you were planning to send?
Oh, not particular. Wait, what would we be sending in LWKD?
No, I just wanted to. You were planning on doing that, right? I just wanted to see if you want to talk about that, or if not, we can move on.
No, it's not related to the release team, except that I do put an update in the release in there, but I always do.
Okay, so you were going to include the CI signal there, or anything of that sort? Or?
No. The CI signal is going to go to you tomorrow. The only involvement with LWKD is that we produce LWKD every Monday afternoon, which is why I wanted to do the CI signal report.
Got it.
Tuesdays.
Okay. All right. That sounds good then.
It is useful to read, going back to the earlier conversation about like, do we follow what the PRs are? Not closely, but if there's things that Josh or others in their sort of weekly roll-ups of the community happenings have noted, it's handy context for the release team to have a sense of where things are going, just in the broad at this phase.
Cool. So yeah, as Josh was mentioning, we spoke a little bit last week after our meeting regarding sending out a weekly report. So once I get the CI signal report on Tuesdays, I just plan to can that information and any other update that we might have from the other roles and send out a report out Wednesday. I will try this out this week and probably the next and see if there's any value that's coming out of it in terms of is there more information to tap to the CI signal or not. and accordingly, we can tweak the cadence and the content of that report. But it's something that I just wanted to try out this week and next. So that's pretty much it. That brings us to the end, unless anyone has any comments or any other discussion topics.
I have one thing, but it's unrelated to 113. It's a SIG release thing that I wanted to ask you about, Aish, but I can hit you up on Slack later if you're around.
Yes, I'll ping you after this.
Cool, thank you.
Awesome. If that's it, then we can call our early meeting. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you in Slack and next week.
Thanks all.
Yeah.
Yeah.